Nobody moved in next door, until it was too late. Part 1. The U-Haul lumbered to a stop, kicking up dust that coated the already tired-looking hydrangeas lining our new walkway. Mark hopped out, stretching, a grin splitting his face. "Home sweet home," he declared, already halfway to the back to wrestle with the ramp. I lingered a moment, taking it all in. The house was a craftsman bungalow, its cedar siding weathered a soft gray. It was smaller than our last place, cozier, nestled in a quiet cul-de-sac in Maplewood. Perfect for us, really? Except for the house next door. It was a mirror image of ours architecturally, but that's where the similarities ended. Where our lawn was neatly trimmed and dotted with nascent flower beds, theirs was a jungle of overgrown weeds and gnarled bushes. The paint was peeling in ghostly strips, exposing the bare wood beneath. The windows were dark and lifeless, like vacant eyes staring out at the world. "Been empty for years, Mrs. Henderson," our neighbor on the other side had told me earlier, while I was admiring her prize-winning roses. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Ever since?" "Well, since the incident." I'd pressed her for details, but she'd just shaken her head, a strange mixture of sadness and fear in her eyes. "Best to let sleeping dogs lie, dear," she'd said before hurrying back inside. Mark, oblivious to my unease, was already halfway up the ramp with a box labeled kitchen utensils. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of unpacking, organizing, and trying to make the place our own. Mark, ever the pragmatist, threw himself into setting up his home office and optimizing the Wi-Fi. I focused on creating a comfortable space, filling the rooms with our familiar furniture and artwork. But even amidst the flurry of activity, the house next door remained a constant presence in the periphery of my vision. I'd catch myself staring at it while I was washing dishes or watering the plants. It felt like it was watching me back. One evening I was working late, trying to finish a design project for a new client. The house was quiet, Mark asleep upstairs. I glanced out the window, half expecting to see nothing but the darkness of the night. But there it was, a flicker. A brief, almost imperceptible flash of light in one of the upstairs windows of the vacant house. My heart pounded. I stared, willing it to reappear, but the house remained stubbornly dark and silent. I told Mark about it the next morning over coffee. He yawned, taking a large gulp. "Probably just a reflection, Sarah," he said dismissively. "Or maybe the wind caught a piece of loose metal or something." "But it was a light," I insisted. "I saw it." He patted my hand. "You're probably just tired. You've been working too hard. Maybe you should take a break." I knew he meant well, but his easy dismissal only fueled my anxiety. I started paying even closer attention to the vacant house. I'd sit by the window for hours, pretending to work while discreetly observing its every detail. That's when I started noticing the deliveries. A large, unmarked van would pull up to the house late at night, usually around 2 or 3 a.m. A lone driver, his face obscured by a baseball cap, would unload large, oddly shaped packages and carry them inside. He never looked around, never made eye contact. He just went about his business with a nervous efficiency, as if he were desperate to leave as quickly as possible. One time I saw him glance in my direction. His eyes darted away instantly, but not before I saw the look in them a mixture of fear and something else, something I couldn't quite identify. I tried to get a better look at the packages, but they were always wrapped in thick, brown paper, with no markings or labels. They were too heavy for him to carry easily, judging by the way he strained with each load. The deliveries happened every few days, always at the same ungodly hour. Each time I felt a growing sense of unease, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck that told me something was very wrong. I tried to research the history of the house. I spent hours online, scouring old newspaper articles and property records, but I found surprisingly little. The house had been built in the 1950s and had changed hands several times over the years. But there was nothing about the incident that Mrs. Henderson had mentioned, nothing to explain why the house had been vacant for so long. The official records were strangely incomplete, almost as if someone had deliberately tried to erase its past. Then came the construction sounds. Late one night, I was jolted awake by a series of loud bangs and thumps. I crept to the window and peered out. In the darkness, I could see figures moving around the vacant house. They were working on the back near the overgrown patio. I could hear the sounds of hammering, sawing, and the low rumble of a generator. I grabbed my phone and called Mark, who was snoring softly beside me. "Mark, wake up. There are people working on the house next door." He groaned, rolling over. "What? It's the middle of the night." "I know, but they're making a lot of noise. You need to see this." He reluctantly got out of bed and stumbled to the window. He rubbed his eyes, trying to focus. "I don't see anything," he said after a moment. "Maybe you were dreaming." "No, I wasn't. They were just there." "Maybe they went inside." We stood there for a while, watching the house in silence, but there was no further activity. The only sound was the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of traffic. Mark shook his head. "I think you're letting this whole thing get to you, Sarah. It's just an old house. It's probably just settling." I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't. I knew what I had seen, what I had heard. and I knew that something strange was happening next door. A week later, I was walking back from the cafe, clutching a lukewarm latte. As I passed the vacant house, something caught my eye. It was a symbol scratched into the surface of one of the downstairs windows. It was small and faint, almost invisible in the fading light, but I recognized it instantly. It was a symbol I had seen in an old book I had borrowed from the library, a book on obscure occult rituals. It was a symbol associated with dark magic, with summoning entities from other realms. The blood ran cold in my veins. I knew then that this was more than just an abandoned house. This was something sinister, something dangerous. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, haunted by the image of the symbol. I felt a growing sense of dread, a certainty that something terrible was about to happen. I got up and went to the window. I stared at the vacant house, my heart pounding in my chest, and then I saw it, a figure, standing in one of the upstairs windows. It was too dark to make out any details, but I could sense its presence, its malevolent gaze fixed on me. It was tall and gaunt, with a long, narrow head. Its eyes were black and empty, like bottomless pits. I gasped, recoiling from the window. I felt a wave of nausea, a feeling of pure, unadulterated terror. I stumbled back to bed, pulling the covers over my head. I lay there, trembling, until the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains. The next morning, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit idly by while whatever was happening next door continued to unfold. I had to find out what was going on, even if it meant putting myself in danger. I waited until Mark had left for work. Then, armed with a flashlight and a healthy dose of fear, I walked over to the vacant house. The front door was locked, but I found the back door slightly ajar. My heart pounded in my chest as I pushed it open and slipped inside. The air inside the house was thick and heavy, filled with a musty odor of decay and something else, something vaguely chemical. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the creaking of the floorboards beneath my feet. The house was a mess. Dust and cobwebs covered everything. The furniture was old and broken, draped in faded sheets. The wallpaper was peeling, revealing layers of aged paint. I moved cautiously through the house, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. I checked each room one by one, but I found nothing out of the ordinary, nothing to explain the strange events I had witnessed. Then I went down to the basement. The stairs were rickety and covered in dust. As I descended, the air grew colder and heavier. The smell of chemicals became stronger, almost overpowering. The basement was a large, unfinished space. The walls were damp and stained with mildew. The floor was littered with debris and broken glass. And then I saw it. A hidden room. It was located in the far corner of the basement, concealed behind a false wall. I pulled away the wall, revealing a narrow doorway. I hesitated for a moment, my hand trembling. Then, taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The room was small and windowless. The air was thick with the smell of chemicals and something else, something metallic and vaguely unpleasant. The room was filled with strange equipment. Beakers, test tubes, Bunsen burners, and other scientific instruments were scattered across a makeshift table. There were also several strange devices that I couldn't identify, devices that looked like something out of a science fiction movie. The walls were covered in symbols, the same symbol I had seen scratched into the window. They were painted in a dark, viscous substance that looked like dried blood. And then I saw the notes. They were handwritten, scrawled on scraps of paper in a frantic, illegible script. They were filled with disturbing details of experiments, of rituals, of things that I couldn't even begin to comprehend. My blood ran cold. I knew then that this was not just an abandoned house. This was something far more sinister, something far more dangerous. Suddenly, I heard a noise upstairs, a creak, a footstep. Someone was in the house. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I had to get out of there, but it was too late. I turned to leave, but the figure was standing in the doorway, blocking my path. It was the figure from the window. Its features were still obscured by shadows, but its presence was undeniably menacing. It was tall and gaunt, with a long, narrow head. Its eyes were black and empty, like bottomless pits. It raised a hand, beckoning me closer. I screamed, turning and running back into the basement. I tripped over a pile of debris, falling to the floor. The figure was coming after me, its footsteps echoing through the house. I scrambled to my feet and ran towards the stairs, but the figure was faster than me. It grabbed my arm, its grip like a vise. I screamed again, kicking and struggling. I managed to break free and stumble up the stairs. I ran through the house, towards the back door. The figure was right behind me, its footsteps growing louder with each passing second. I reached the door and flung it open, running out into the yard. I didn't stop running until I reached my own house, slamming the door behind me and locking it. I stood there, trembling, gasping for breath. I looked back at the vacant house. The figure was standing in the window, watching me. Its eyes were burning with an unholy light. I called the police. Officer Davies arrived a few minutes later. He listened to my story, his expression skeptical. "You're saying someone broke into the house next door and was conducting some kind of experiments?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, I insisted. You have to believe me. I saw it with my own eyes," he sighed. "I'll take a look around, ma'am, but I wouldn't get your hopes up. That house has been empty for years. It's probably just kids playing pranks." He went over to the vacant house and spent about half an hour inside. When he came back, his expression was unchanged. "I didn't find anything, ma'am," he said. "The house is empty. There's no sign of any experiments, no strange symbols, nothing." I stared at him in disbelief. "But I saw it, I was in there, it was all real," he shrugged. "Maybe you were just imagining things, ma'am. You've been under a lot of stress lately, moving into a new house and all." He gave me his card and told me to call him if I saw anything else. Then he left. Mark was furious when he got home. "You went into that house," he yelled, his face red with anger. "Are you crazy? What if something had happened to you?" "But Mark, I told you something is going on in there. I had to find out what it was." "Well, you didn't find anything, did you? The police said the house is empty. You're just letting your imagination run wild." He stormed off to his office, slamming the door behind him. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. I was alone. No one believed me. They all thought I was crazy. I tried to convince Officer Davies to take me seriously. I told him about the symbol, about the deliveries, about the construction sounds. I even showed him the book from the library that contained the symbol. He agreed to investigate further, but he found nothing. The delivery driver was never seen again. The construction workers were never identified. And the house remained stubbornly empty, its secrets locked away behind its decaying walls. I felt increasingly isolated and gaslit. I started to question my own sanity. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe I was just letting my anxiety get the best of me. Then one night the phone rang. It was late, around 3 a.m. I picked up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello," I said, my voice trembling. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then a voice, it was distorted, garbled, almost inhuman. It whispered, "We know you were in our house." The line went dead. I slammed the phone down, my body shaking uncontrollably. I knew then that I wasn't crazy. I knew that what I had seen was real, and I knew that I was in danger. I did some digging online and found an old news article about the family that lived in the home. The mother, father, and 2 children all vanished, presumed murdered. The case went cold after a few months. I went to visit the family's grave, only to find it was empty. The bodies were no longer inside their crypt. I ran back home. As I pulled up in front of the home, I saw more packages at the front door of the vacant house. As I hung up the phone in terror, I looked out my window and saw the delivery driver standing across the street, staring directly at my house. He smiled, revealing rows of unnaturally sharp teeth. The camera pans over to the vacant house, and a faint light can be seen in one of the upper windows.